My name is Cordelia. I'm 31 years old, and I hold a top-secret developed vetting clearance. The kind of designation that means I'm trusted with the nation's most critical secrets. Yet for all my training and authority, I couldn't protect my own heart from my father. It was late afternoon, when everything unraveled at the base security checkpoint. My father, a retired warrant officer, laughed in the face of the young military police officer on duty. He pointed a grease-stained finger at me while I sat in the driver's seat wearing my dress uniform, the formal sacred uniform of the Royal Marines. "Don't mind her, son," he sneered, his voice thick with contempt. "She's just playing soldier. Wearing a fancy outfit doesn't make her anything special. Open the gate for me." The silence inside the car felt suffocating. He genuinely believed his expired ID card still held authority. He thought his past glory outweighed my present reality. He had no idea that his arrogance had triggered a protocol that was about to demolish everything he believed about himself when the red sirens began to wail and the scanner flashed the words. "Top secret priority 1. The smirk vanished from his face. That was the moment the harshest truth of his life began to unfold. Before we jump into today's story, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Take a second to tell me in the comments. Now, let's begin. The humiliation didn't start at the gate. It started 2 days earlier in a sticky-floored cafe near the motorway. I had stood before the mirror in my hallway for 20 minutes that evening, adjusting the dress sword at my hip. The midnight blue fabric of my uniform felt heavy against my skin. The gold insignia on my shoulders caught the light. Today was my father's birthday, and I wanted him to really see me. Not as Cordelia, the little girl who scraped her knees, but as a woman who commanded respect in the halls of Whitehall. I'd made reservations at a proper restaurant in London, somewhere with white tablecloths and quiet corners, somewhere worthy of a milestone celebration. Then, an hour before dinner, my phone buzzed, a text from James. "Cancel the fancy place. Too stiff. Meet me at the cafe on the A3. That's where the real food is." I sighed. The sound echoed through my empty flat. I drove my government-issued black SUV to the diner. The moment I stepped inside wearing my dress uniform, every head turned. Heads of construction workers in neon vests, delivery drivers, men with calloused hands. A woman in dress uniform at a working-class cafe at 7 o'clock was unusual. Heads turned. I walked to a booth in the back, my polished shoes clicking sharply on the linoleum. I sat with my back straight, hands folded on the sticky table, waiting. James arrived 20 minutes late. He didn't apologize. He pushed through the glass door, bringing a gust of humid air with him. He wore an old faded t-shirt with the Royal Marines bulldog cracking across the chest. His jeans were stained with motor oil. As he slid into the booth opposite me, I saw the grime embedded under his fingernails. He didn't look me in the eye. "That coat is too tight, Cordelia," he said, loud enough for the next table to hear. "You look like one of those film actors playing soldiers who don't know how to hold a rifle properly." He chuckled dryly, and the sound grated against my nerves. "Hey," he shouted at the nearest waitress, not even checking if she was our server. "Get me the all-star breakfast. Scramble the eggs hard and keep the coffee coming." He didn't ask what I wanted. He didn't ask how my drive was. He just assumed his presence was the gift. A young waitress approached moments later with the coffee pot. She looked tired, maybe a student working a double shift. As she poured, her eyes widened at my shoulder boards. She stopped, the pot hovering. "Oh wow, ma'am, are you an officer?" She stood a little straighter. "Thank you for your service, ma'am. My brother is in training right now." James's hand hit the formica table like a hammer. The silverware jumped. Coffee sloshed over the rim of my cup. "Don't bother, sweetheart," he barked, cutting her off. His voice was sharp, brutal. The waitress flinched, pulling the coffee pot back as if burned. James pointed a fork at me, waving it dismissively like he was shooing a fly. "Don't let the uniform fool you. She's just pushing paper in an air-conditioned office. She's never held a real rifle. She's civilian management." He looked at me with a smirk that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Charge her full price. She makes plenty doing nothing." The silence that followed was absolute. The waitress turned bright red, her eyes darting between my rank and my father's aggressive stare. At a booth behind us, 3 older men, veterans, judging by their caps, snickered. I heard one mutter, "Desk jockey." My face burned. Heat rushed up my neck, burning under the stiff collar of my uniform. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But I froze. I recited General Mattis's words in my head. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. In that moment, the person I had to kill was the little girl who just wanted her dad to be proud. I clenched my fist under the table so hard my nails broke the skin. The pain grounded me. I looked up at the mortified waitress. "Just black coffee for me, please," I said, my voice steady and eerie in its calmness. "Thank you." The waitress hurried away. Frank snorted, satisfied. He dug into his eggs and bacon the moment they arrived, chewing with his mouth open, grease shining on his chin. He ate with the certainty of a man who believed he had just won a war. He didn't realize he had just fired the first shot in a conflict he was destined to lose. Rain lashed against my windshield as I drove home from the cafe. The wipers matched the dull ache in my chest. The humiliation clung to me like the smell of stale grease. But as the miles blurred past on the motorway, my mind drifted back to where this Cold War truly began. It was 10 years ago. Quantico, or rather, the Royal Military Academy, where I had been commissioned. I could still feel the biting cold of that December morning. For 10 grueling weeks, I had pushed my body and mind past breaking. I had crawled through freezing mud, navigated forests with only a compass, and endured screaming instructors until my voice was gone. I didn't just survive, I thrived. I graduated at the top of my class, standing on the parade ground in the rain. I raised my right hand to take the oath. I, Cordelia Ashworth, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the interests of this nation. The pride I felt was incandescent. I was no longer just Cordelia. I was a second lieutenant in the Royal Marines. As the ceremony ended, I scanned the crowd of families huddled under umbrellas. I was looking for one face. Then I saw him. James stood apart from the other cheering parents. He wore his old field jacket, arms crossed tight over his chest, his face carved from granite. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. He had spent 22 years climbing the enlisted ranks, earning his stripes through blood and sweat in conflicts most people had forgotten. And on that day, his 22-year-old daughter had just become his technical superior officer. I ran over to him, desperate for approval. "Dad, I did it. I'm a lieutenant." I waited for the hug. I waited for the good job, Marine. I waited for the validation I had been chasing my entire life. Instead, he looked me up and down, his eyes cold and assessing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. My heart leaped. I tore off the paper. Inside lay a single cheap blue ballpoint pen, the kind you buy in bulk at a pound shop. A pen? I looked up at him, confused. He leaned in close, tobacco on his breath. "That's your weapon now," he said, his voice low and mocking. "Don't go getting ink on any real soldiers. You hear me? You're an officer now, Cordelia. That means management. You sit in comfort while men like me do the dying. Don't forget that." He had drawn a line in the sand that day. On one side were the real Marines, the enlisted grunts, the ones with dirt under their nails. On the other side were the officers, the paper pushers, the ones he despised. And I was now the enemy. Over the next decade, that divide only widened. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family visit became a battlefield of passive-aggressive comments. I would come home with news of a promotion, an accommodation medal, a successful deployment. James would listen, stone-faced, then turn to my cousin Robert. Robert was 30 years old, drank heavily before noon, and worked sporadically as a plumber's mate when he wasn't hungover. But to James, Robert was a hero. "Now Robert here," James would boom, clapping my cousin on the back. "Robert knows what real work is. Look at those hands. Collused. Dirty. That's a man who builds something, unlike some people who just push buttons in an office." I tried to buy his affection. When his truck transmission broke down, I paid for repairs. He told the neighbors he fixed it himself. When I offered to help with his mortgage, he threw the paperwork back in my face, accusing me of trying to buy him off with my money. He couldn't stand that I had succeeded in a world he felt he owned, but in a way he couldn't respect. He was jealous. I pulled my car into the garage of my flat in South London. The silence of my empty home greeted me. No husband, no children, just the quiet hum of the heating system. I walked into my office and switched on the lamp. The light fell on the framed certificate hanging above my desk. It was my security clearance documentation, marked with the highest seals of the Ministry of Defense and the Cabinet Office. This paper meant I was one of the most trusted individuals in the nation. It was proof of impeccable character, unwavering loyalty, and supreme competence. To my father, it was just another piece of paper for a desk jockey. I opened the drawer and pulled out my old Bible, the one my mother had given me before she passed. It fell open to a page I'd bookmarked long ago. Matthew 13:57. A prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. Why was it that strangers, like the waitress tonight, or colleagues at work, could see my worth? Why did complete strangers thank me for my service, while my own father looked at me with nothing but disdain? It's a lonely feeling realizing that the people who are supposed to be your biggest cheerleaders are actually rooting for you to fail. I closed the Bible and looked back at the security clearance. The glass reflected my face, tired but set with hard determination. Let him think I'm just a paper pusher. Tomorrow I had a briefing. Tomorrow I would authorize security protocols that kept the nation's leadership alive. Frank might have his pride, but I had a job to do. And in this house, even if it was empty, that job mattered. 2 days passed. The 500 pounds I'd wired to my father sat in the digital void between us, unacknowledged. No text, no thank you card. Just silence. I was sitting on my balcony on a humid Friday evening, nursing a glass of iced tea and trying to decompress from a 60-hour work week when my phone buzzed, Dad. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I could let it go to voicemail, but the conditioning ran deep. You answer the call. I slid the bar to accept. Hello, Dad Cordelia, he started, his voice booming without preamble. What are you doing this Sunday? He didn't ask how I was. He didn't mention the money for the truck. He just plowed forward with his agenda. I'm catching up on rest, Dad, I said, rubbing my temples. It's been a long week. Well, wake up, he said. Old Guns Richardson is retiring. You remember Michael? He was my gunnery sergeant back when. He's finally hanging up the uniform after 30 years. The ceremony is at the National Armed Forces Memorial Museum, but the real party is at the officers' mess on base. I need you to drive me. I need you to drive me. I paused. You want me to drive you? Is your truck still broken? The truck is fine, he dismissed quickly. Too quickly, but my retiree ID is expired. I found it yesterday and the damn thing ran out 2 years ago. The website to renew it is a mess. All that bureaucratic nonsense. I don't have time for it. He paused, waiting for me to connect the dots. When I didn't, he huffed. So, I need you to drive me onto the base. You have your active duty card. You can get us through the gate. I don't want to deal with visitor control. The line is always an hour long. My stomach tightened. Dad, it doesn't work like that anymore. Not since heightened security. If your ID is expired, they won't wave you through because you're with me. We still have to stop at the gate. And if their scanner flags your ID as invalid, they'll turn us around. Don't lecture me about security, he snapped, his voice rising. I was a warrant officer when you were in nappies. I know the MPs at the gate. They're good lads. They see a veteran. They see me in the passenger seat, and they'll open the gate. It's called professional courtesy. Something you officers don't understand. He was living in a fantasy world. He refused to accept the reality of the modern military, a machine run by strict protocols and zero-tolerance policies. Dad, I'm telling you, I said, my voice firm. If we roll up to that gate and you hand them an expired ID, it's going to be a problem. I could lose my clearance if I try to bypass protocol. Oh, for God's sake, Lily, he shouted. Stop being such a coward. You're always so scared of the rules. Grow a spine. I'm asking for a ride to a retirement party, not to break into Fort Knox. You just drive the car. Let me handle the talking. They'll respect that. He truly believed that his rank, retired for a decade, still held more weight than my active duty commission. He saw me not as a major officer, but as his chauffeur, a useful idiot with a valid ID card to facilitate his entry into the club. I was about to refuse, but then a thought stopped me. He wouldn't listen to me. He never listened to me. The only way he would learn was to see it for himself. He needed to hit the wall of reality. Fine, I said, my voice dropping to a cool, flat tone. I'll take you. Good, he grunted, satisfied. Pick me up at 0800. Don't be late. Michael's speech starts at 0900. I hung up the phone and set it gently on the patio table. I looked out at the London skyline in the distance. I thought about my ID card. The defense card with the gold security endorsement that identified me as a field-grade officer. I thought about the top secret developed vetting designation in the government database. He wanted to go to the base. He wanted to show off to his old buddies. He wanted to play the big shot warrant officer one last time. Okay, Dad, I whispered to the empty air. You want to go to the base? I'll take you. But you might not like what you find there. I took a sip of tea. It tasted bitter but refreshing. Sunday was going to be a very interesting day, or 800 hours. Sunday morning. My black SUV idled in the driveway of my father's small terraced house in Surrey. The humidity was already rising. Sticking my shirt to the leather seat, I watched the front door. The door swung open and James Ashworth emerged. He wore a polo shirt tucked into khaki trousers that had seen better days, and a veteran's cap pulled low over his eyes. He marched toward my car like a general inspecting troops. He yanked the passenger door open and hauled himself up into the seat with a grunt. The smell of Old Spice and stale tobacco instantly filled the cabin. "Morning, Dad," I said. Keeping my tone neutral, he didn't answer. He just looked around the interior of the car, his lip curling in a sneer. "Jesus, Cordelia, what is all this junk? Touchscreens, cameras, sensors. A car is supposed to be an engine and four wheels. You don't need a computer to drive down the road." "It's standard safety equipment, Dad," I said, putting the car in gear. "Safety," he scoffed. "Women drivers always need a computer to tell them how to park. That's why you bought a tank like this, isn't it? Because you're afraid of the road." I didn't take the bait. I merged onto the motorway, heading south toward the base. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. He lifted his right leg and propped his foot up on my dashboard. His heavy work boot, the sole caked with dried red mud, rested directly on the pristine beige leather. My jaw tightened. "Dad, get your foot down. You're getting mud on the dash," he laughed. "Relax, princess. It's just a little dirt. It wipes off. You treat this car better than you treat your own father." He didn't move his foot. I reached over and shoved his leg down hard. I said, "Get it down." He slapped my hand away. "Watch it. You almost swerved." He shook his head, looking out the window. "God, you're uptight. No wonder David left you. A man can't live with a woman who treats everything like a museum exhibit." The air left my lungs. David, my ex-fiancé. That sore spot hadn't healed in 3 years. He had walked out because he couldn't handle my deployment schedule. He wanted a wife home for dinner every night, not one who disappeared into classified briefings for weeks at a time. "David left because he was weak," I said, my voice icy. "He left because you're unnatural," James countered, his voice dripping with venom. "Look at you, Cordelia. You're 31. When your mother was your age, she had 3 kids running around. She had a home. She cooked dinner. You? You have a cat and a stack of paper awards that don't mean anything. What kind of legacy is that? A woman's place is building a family, not playing soldier." The words hit me like physical blows. Unnatural. Empty. Failure. I felt tears pricking the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. I reached for the radio dial and cranked the volume. Music flooded the cabin loud enough to rattle the speakers. I needed to drown him out. I needed to drown out the voice that sounded like my own insecurities. James glared at me. He reached over and snapped the radio off. "I am talking to you," he hissed. "Show some respect to your elders. I'm trying to help you. Someone has to tell you the truth." My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I was shaking. "We're almost there," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Ahead of us, the tree line broke, revealing the imposing entrance to the Royal Marines base. Tall fences topped with razor wire stretched endlessly in both directions. Concrete barriers designed to stop a truck bomb formed a maze leading to the guard shacks. Seeing the base seemed to energize James. He sat up straighter, puffing out his chest. "All right," he said, shifting into command mode. "Listen to me. When we get up there, roll your window down. Smile. Big smile. Show some teeth. Those young MPs, they've been standing in the sun for hours. They like a pretty face. Don't act all stiff and official." "Dad, that's not how it works," I warned. "Shut up and listen," he interrupted. "I'll do the talking. I'll tell them I'm Warrant Officer Ashworth. I'll tell them you're my daughter, giving me a lift. Just nod and look sweet. If they ask for ID, just fumble around in your purse until I wave them off. It's a psychological trick. Establish dominance, then offer friendship." We were getting closer. I could see the military police officer in the lane ahead. He wasn't smiling. He was wearing full tactical gear, body armor, helmet. A sleek black rifle was slung across his chest. A German Shepherd K9 paced nervously on a leash, held by a second officer. This wasn't the world that James remembered. This was a fortress. "Dad," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Look at them. Look at the gear. This is high alert. They are not here to flirt." "They're Marines," James insisted, oblivious. "We take care of our own." I slowed the car as we approached the yellow line. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew what was coming. I knew with certainty that he was about to humiliate himself and me. I took a deep breath. "Dad," I said sharply, Silence, we are here. He turned to me, his eyes bulging with disbelief. Did you just give me an order? Be quiet, I whispered, bringing the car to a halt. James opened his mouth to scream at me. But before he could, the MP stepped forward, his hand raised in a crisp halt signal. I lowered the window. The humid air rushed in, carrying the scent of exhaust and tension. James leaned across the center console, ignoring my warning, ignoring the rifle, ignoring reality. Hey there, son, he boomed, his grin more like a snarl. How's the service treating you today? The MP didn't smile back. He didn't relax. His eyes scanned the interior of the car, cold and calculating, before locking onto James's face. Sir, ma'am, the officer said, his voice flat and professional. Please state your business on base. Business. James laughed, a harsh barking sound. Pleasure mostly. Heading to the officer's mess for a retirement party. My old mate Michael Richardson, Guns Richardson, is finally punching out. I'm Warrant Officer James Ashworth, retired. We're running a little late, so if you could just lift that gate, we'll be on our way. James sat back, crossing his arms, expecting the magic words warrant officer to dissolve the protocols like mist. The officer didn't move toward the gate controls. I need to see identification for all adult passengers, sir. James's smile faltered. He fished a battered leather wallet from his back pocket, dug through receipts, and pulled out a blue ID card. The laminate was peeling at the corners. The photo was faded. He thrust it toward the officer. Here, it's a little old, but the rank doesn't expire, right? The officer took the card. He looked at the front, then flipped it over to check the expiration date. He paused. He looked at James, then back at the card. Sir, the officer said, his tone dropping cooler. This ID expired in March 2019. That's over 5 years ago. Yeah, I know. James waved a dismissive hand. I've been meaning to get down to renew it, but you know how bureaucracy is. Just do me a solid, son. Honor the service. Let us through. I'm good for it. The officer handed the card back. I can't do that, sir. Base access requires valid, unexpired identification. Without a valid ID, you are unauthorized to enter. You'll need to turn around and proceed to visitor control. There's a U-turn lane right there. I am not going to visitor control, James shouted, spit flying onto my dashboard. Do you know who I am? I served this country while you were still in nappies. I earned the right to walk on this ground. Those are the regulations, sir, the officer said, unbothered. If you don't have another form of valid identification, you'll need to turn around. There's no regulation that says you can treat a veteran like this, James roared. The girl, she's with me. She's my daughter. She's got a valid card. She's vouching for me. The officer looked at me. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my face a mask of neutrality. Ma'am, the officer asked, do you have your defense ID? Before I could answer, James answered for me. She's just a civilian. She's just driving the car. She doesn't know the protocols. I'm the sponsor here. I'm telling you to open the gate. It was a lie so blatant, so desperate, it made my stomach churn. He would rather strip me of my rank than admit he needed my help. The officer's posture changed instantly. The boredom vanished. His hand dropped instinctively to his waist. It didn't draw the weapon, but it rested on the grip. Sir, lower your voice, the officer ordered. He took a step back. You are disrupting traffic and creating a disturbance. You have been denied access. Turn the vehicle around immediately. James looked at the officer's hand on the weapon. For a split second, fear flashed in his eyes, but his pride crushed it. Don't you threaten me, he roared. He reached for the door handle. I'm going to teach you some respect, you. Stop! I screamed. Sir, remain in the vehicle, the officer shouted. Step out of the vehicle now. The situation had spiraled. We had gone from a routine check to a potential hostile incident in seconds. The K9 unit behind the officer stepped forward, the German shepherd barking ferociously, straining against the leash. Other MPs were running out of the guard post, hands on their weapons. James froze, his hand on the latch. He stared at the gun. He stared at the dog. The reality of the modern world crashed into his delusion. He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. I unclenched my hands from the wheel. The trembling stopped. A cold, icy calm washed over me. The same calm I felt during crisis situations in my work. Frank, sit down, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steel. I turned to the window. I looked directly at the officer, ignoring the gun, ignoring the chaos. Sergeant, eyes on me, I commanded. My tone was icy calm, a sharp contrast to the shouting that had just occurred. The officer hesitated. But something in my voice, the absolute lack of fear, made him pause. He signaled to his partner with the dog to hold position. I reached into the center console and pulled out my wallet. I flipped it open and slid out my defense ID card. This one wasn't the standard white card that every service member carried. This one had a distinct gold security chip embedded in the front, the mark of someone carrying the highest classification clearance. I held it out the window, pinching it between two fingers. "Run it," I commanded. "Check the biometric scanner right now." Something in my demeanor, the absolute lack of fear, made him pause. He signaled to his partner to hold position. Wearily, he stepped forward and snatched the card from my hand. He looked at it skeptically. Then he raised his handheld scanner, the defense biometric device. He aimed the red laser at the security barcode on the back of my card. Beep. The scanner didn't flash green. It let out a long, piercing, high-pitched tone that I knew very well. Beep. The LED light on top strobed rapidly between red and blue. The officer frowned, thinking the machine had malfunctioned. Then he looked down at the screen. His jaw dropped. I knew exactly what he was seeing. Bold capital letters scrolling across the display. Cordelia Ashworth, Top Secret Developed Vetting, Priority Access Level 1, Executive Security Duty. Yankee White, or its British equivalent, isn't just a clearance. It's the highest mark. It means I've been vetted by every agency imaginable to stand within arm's reach of the Prime Minister. It means I carry secrets that could topple governments. It means that on any military installation in the world, I am not just an officer. I am a VIP. The officer stared at the screen for 3 full seconds, his brain trying to reconcile the angry old man in the passenger seat with the high-level clearance holder in the driver's seat. He swallowed hard. The color drained from his face. He looked up at me. The suspicion was gone. The aggression was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He snapped to attention so fast his heels clicked together with an audible crack on the pavement. His hand flew from his weapon to his brow in a perfect, rigid salute. "Ma'am," he shouted, his voice cracking. "My apologies, Major Ashworth. I wasn't aware. I didn't." He fumbled to hand the card back to me with both hands, treating it like a sacred relic. "We have a Priority 1 entry," he yelled to the other guards in the shack. "Open the lane. Open the VIP lane now. Now!" The sudden shift was jarring. The K9 handler yanked his dog back. The other MPs, who had been ready to move forward, lowered their rifles and scrambled to hit the buttons in the guard shack. The heavy steel barrier arms shot up instantly. A yellow light began to flash above the gate. "Please proceed, Major," the officer shouted over the noise, still holding his salute. "Drive safely, ma'am." I took the card back, sliding it coolly into my wallet. I nodded at him, a single curt nod of dismissal. "Carry on, Sergeant," I said. I hit the button to roll the window up. The silence that returned to the car was heavier than before. It wasn't the silence of tension anymore. It was the vacuum of shock. I put the SUV into drive and pressed the accelerator. The car surged forward, gliding past the stunned officers, past the concrete barriers, and onto the smooth pavement of the base. I didn't look at James immediately. I kept my eyes on the road, merging into the VIP lane that bypassed the winding traffic. But out of my peripheral vision, I could see him. He was slumped against the passenger door, his mouth hanging open, slack-jawed. His eyes were wide, darting from the rearview mirror, where the officers were still standing at attention, to my face, and then down to my purse, where the card now lay hidden. The bluster was gone. The warrant officer persona had evaporated. "What?" he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "What the hell was that?" I adjusted the rearview mirror. A small, cold smile touched my lips. "That, Dad," I said softly, "is what a real officer looks like." I drove on, leaving his shattered ego in the dust behind us. The VIP lane was smooth, devoid of the potholes that clogged the regular access roads. Outside the tinted windows, the base hummed with activity. We passed a platoon of young recruits marching in formation. As my car approached, the corporal leading them barked a command. "Eyes right." The entire platoon turned their heads toward my vehicle. The corporal snapped a salute. They weren't saluting me personally. They couldn't see through the tint. They were saluting the blue officer's decal on my windshield and the red license plates on my bumper. They were saluting the authority I represented. James saw it. He flinched, his hand gripping the passenger door handle so tight, his knuckles turned white. For decades, he had been the one barking orders. He had been the one demanding respect. Now he was a passenger in a world that recognized me as royalty and him as baggage. He shifted in his seat. The leather creaked loudly. He cleared his throat, but no sound came out. He tried again. Cordelia, his voice was unrecognizable. It was hoarse, stripped of all its bluster and bravado. It sounded small, scared. Yes, Dad, I answered, keeping my eyes fixed on the road ahead. That card, what was that thing? He gestured vaguely back toward the gate. That Yankee White or whatever. What the hell is that? He didn't sneer. He didn't mock. He asked the question like a child asking why the sky is blue, with genuine, terrified confusion. I slowed the car slightly, letting the question hang in the air for a moment. It's a top-secret developed vetting clearance, I said, my voice calm, factual, devoid of emotion. Category 1, priority access. It means the government has vetted every detail of my life, Dad. Every email, every bank account, every person I've ever known. They vetted you. They vetted Mum. They vetted the neighbors. Everyone. James stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. Why? He whispered. Because I don't fetch coffee, Dad, I said, finally letting a hint of steel enter my voice. I work in executive security operations. I manage the logistics of protecting the highest levels of government. When the Prime Minister travels, I am one of the people who decides which route is safe. I know evacuation protocols. I know where the nuclear football goes in an emergency. I glanced over at him. He looked pale, as if the blood had drained from his face. You said I was a secretary, I continued, relentless. You said I never held a real rifle. You're right. I don't carry a rifle. But I carry the authority to shut down this entire base with a phone call. I carry the responsibility of keeping the commander-in-chief alive. James shrank back into his seat. He looked out the window at the helicopter hangars passing by. Those massive Sea King helicopters sat on the tarmac, gleaming in the sun. He knew what those machines were. I didn't know, he mumbled. You never told me. I tried, I said. For 10 years I tried. But every time I opened my mouth, you told me to shut up. You told me my awards were paper. You told me I was playing dress-up. I pulled the car to a stop at a red light. The silence returned. But this time it was filled with the sound of illusions shattering. I turned my head and looked him full in the face. The man who had terrorized my self-esteem for 3 decades suddenly looked frail. Old. His old t-shirt looked faded and sad next to the crisp reality of the active duty base. You called me a civilian back there, I said softly. James winced. Look around this car, Dad, I said. Look at where we are. You have an expired ID and a mouth that almost got you arrested. I have the keys to the kingdom. In this car, you are the only civilian. If it wasn't for me, you'd be sitting in a holding cell, waiting to be processed for trespassing and disorderly conduct. James looked down at his hands, those calloused, grease-stained hands that he was so proud of. He rubbed them together nervously. He looked at his boots, still muddy, resting on the floor mat. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the realization hit him. He wasn't the big dog anymore. He wasn't the gatekeeper of what it meant to be a Marine. He was a guest who had behaved very badly. The light turned green. I didn't wait for him to finish whatever he was going to say. I eased the car forward, driving away from the main road, away from the party. Instead, I turned off and pulled into a deserted gravel overlook near the edge of the base. Through the windshield, a river flowed sluggishly, its grey waters reflecting the overcast sky. It was quiet here, just the sound of wind in the trees and the ticking of the cooling engine. As I turned the key and killed the ignition, I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned in my seat to face him. James was staring at his knees. His shoulders, usually squared and tense with aggression, were slumped forward. He looked deflated. Why, Dad? I asked. My voice wasn't angry anymore. It was just tired, broken. Why did you always have to make me feel small? He didn't answer. He just picked at a loose thread on his khaki trousers. Why was nothing ever good enough? I pressed, the words tumbling out faster now, fueled by 10 years of suppressed hurt. I graduated top of my class. I got promoted early. I handle national security. And every single time you looked at me like I was a mistake, like I was a joke. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and stinging. What did I do wrong? Are you ashamed of me? James flinched at the word ashamed. His hands balled into fists on his lap, shaking violently. For a long time, the only sound in the car was my own ragged breathing. I thought he was going to yell again. I thought he was going to tell me to stop whining, to suck it up. Then I heard a sound I had never heard in 31 years. A sob. A choked, guttural sound that seemed ripped from his throat against his will. James Ashworth, the man who once told me that crying was for civilians and babies, was weeping. He covered his face with his rough, grease-stained hands. His whole body shook. I wasn't ashamed of you, Cordelia, he gasped, his voice muffled by his palms. I was ashamed of me. I sat frozen, stunned into silence. He lowered his hands. His face was wet, his eyes red and swollen. That day, he whispered, his voice trembling. Graduation day, when I saw you standing there in that officer's uniform. You looked so tall, so powerful, and I looked at myself and all I saw was an old man with bad knees and a pension that barely covers the rent. I saw a mechanic, a grunt, and you were going places I could never go. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, sniffing loudly. You were smart. You were giving orders to men like me, and I got scared. Scared that you would realize your old man wasn't a hero. Just a mechanic. I thought if I pushed you down, if I reminded you that I was the real soldier, maybe I could keep you on my level. Maybe I could keep being the dad, the one in charge. He looked out at the river, shame written in every line of his weathered face. It was jealousy, Cordelia. Pure ugly jealousy. I was jealous of my own little girl, and because I was weak, I tried to break you to make myself feel strong. He turned back to me, tears streaming freely. Now I'm a terrible father. I know that. I've been a terrible father for a long time. The confession hung in the air, raw and painful, but it was also cleansing. It was the truth I had been starving for. He didn't hate me. He didn't think I was incompetent. He had been fighting a war against his own insecurity, and I had been collateral damage. My heart, which had been hardened by years of resentment, began to soften. I looked at this man, this flawed, broken, proud old man, and I didn't see a monster anymore. I saw a person who was hurting. I reached across the console. I took his hand, that rough, calloused hand that had fixed trucks, built fences, and yes, pushed me away. Dad, I said gently, I don't need you to be a general. I don't care about your rank. I don't care if you fix trucks or fly jets. I just needed you to be my dad. I just needed you to tell me I did good. James looked at our joined hands, surprised by the contact. You did good, Cordelia. You did damn good. You're incredible. And Dad, I continued, looking him straight in the eye, all that discipline, the grit, the reason I can stand in a room full of generals and hold my ground. I learned that from you. You taught me how to be tough. You gave me the tools to get that clearance. A flicker of light returned to his eyes, a tiny spark of pride. I did? He asked. I nodded. You did, so don't tell me you're useless. You built the foundation. He let out a long, shaky breath. He squeezed my hand back hard. I'm sorry, baby girl, he whispered, using the nickname he hadn't used since I was 10. I am so sorry. I know, Dad, I said. I forgive you. We sat there for a long time, holding hands in the quiet car by the river. The anger was gone. The need to prove myself was gone. In its place was something quieter, but infinitely stronger. Peace. Finally, James sniffed and pulled a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe his face. He blew his nose loudly, a honking sound that made me smile despite myself. Well, he said, his voice gruff but cleared of bitterness. Old Michael is probably wondering where the hell we are. Can't let the gunnery sergeant drink all the beer without me. I chuckled. No, we can't have that. I started the engine. The car purred to life. When we get there, I'll introduce you to the colonel. I think he'd like to meet the man who taught me how to shoot. James straightened his collar. He adjusted his veteran's cap, pulling it down to hide his red eyes. He sat up a little taller in the seat. Yeah, he said, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in years. I'd like that. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the gravel lot. We headed back toward the officers' mess, not as adversaries, but as allies. The war was over, and for the first time, we were both on the winning side. 20 years passed differently in the service. Time moves in duty rotations, in postings, in the grey hairs that slowly replace the brown ones. It moves in the lines etched around your eyes from years of classified work and quiet moments between storms. I stood on a raised podium inside a hangar at the Royal Marines Base. The massive bay doors were open, revealing brilliant sky. Behind me, an enormous British flag hung from the rafters, its red, white, and blue motionless in the still air. I looked down at my uniform. It wasn't the same one I wore that day at the cafe. The gold insignia of a major were long gone. In their place, resting heavily on my shoulders, were the silver eagles of a colonel. And 32 years, that was the tally today. 32 years of service, sacrifice, and survival. Today was the end of the line. My retirement ceremony. The hangar was packed. There were generals in the front rows, senior government officials, and young Marines who weren't even born when I commissioned. The Marine Corps band played a stirring rendition of a marching tune. But my eyes skipped over the brass and the dignitaries. I was looking for the only guest who truly mattered. There in the front row, parked slightly to the side, was a wheelchair. Sitting in it was James Ashworth. He was 77 years old now. Time had shrunk him, carving deep valleys into his face and thinning his hair to white wisps. His hands shook with a constant rhythmic tremor. A blanket was tucked over his knees, but he was wearing his dress uniform. His miniature medals pinned proudly to the lapel. He insisted on wearing them. He wanted everyone to know he was part of the tribe. His eyes, however, hadn't aged. They were bright blue and locked on me with an intensity that burned. But it wasn't the cold fire of judgment anymore. It was the warm glow of unadulterated pride. Next to him sat a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore the uniform of a Marine Corps captain. Marguerite, my daughter. She had graduated from military academy 3 years ago. When she told us she wanted to join, James had cried. I walked to the microphone. The sound of my boots on the wooden stage echoed through the silent hangar. I adjusted the stand, took a deep breath, and looked out at the sea of faces. I went through the standard thank yous. I thanked the commandant, my staff, the brave men and women I'd led. But then I went off script. I looked down at the front row. They say that a soldier's first weapon is their rifle, I said, my voice echoing through the speakers. But a soldier's first teacher is their father. James's head perked up. I want to recognize Warrant Officer James Ashworth, I continued. Many of you know him as a man of honor and service. I know him as the man who taught me the most important lesson of command. It took us a while to get there. We had to drive through some rough terrain to find it. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd from the people who knew our history. He taught me that true strength isn't about how loud you can yell or how much rank you have on your collar, I said. It's about lifting others up until they stand taller than you ever could. I paused, fighting the lump in my throat. Dad, thank you for learning how to see me. Thank you for being my wingman for the last 20 years. I wouldn't be standing here wearing these eagles if you hadn't shown me how to fly. The hangar erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous standing ovation. I saw James cover his face with his shaking hands, just like he had by the river all those years ago. But this time, Marguerite was there, her arm around his shoulder, whispering in his ear. He nodded, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief, and gave me a thumbs up. The ceremony moved to its conclusion. The sergeant major brought the folded flag to me, the symbol of a career finished with honor. I held it to my chest, feeling the texture of the fabric, the weight of the history it held. As the band struck up the Royal Marines March, the crowd stood. I didn't walk toward the exit. I walked straight to the wheelchair. James saw me coming. He started to shift. He gripped the armrests, his knuckles turning white. Marguerite moved to help him, but he waved her off. No, he wheezed. I got it. The music seemed to fade into the background. With supreme effort, fighting against gravity and age and failing muscles, James pushed himself up. His legs wobbled, his back was bent, but he stood. He stood on his own 2 feet, facing his superior officer, facing his daughter. He took a breath, steadied himself, and slowly raised his right hand. It wasn't the snap, crisp salute of a young serviceman. It was slow, trembling, and crooked. But it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was a salute of absolute respect. It was an acknowledgement of everything I had become. It was a father telling his child without a single word, I see you. You are enough. I felt the tears finally spill over, hot tracks running down my face. I snapped my heels together. I raised my hand and returned the salute, holding it, locking eyes with him. Semper Fidelis, Dad, I whispered. Semper Fidelis, Colonel, he whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. He held the salute until I dropped mine. Then, exhausted but triumphant, he sank back into his chair, a smile on his face that could have lit up the darkest room in the Pentagon. I looked at Marguerite. She was beaming, tears in her own eyes. Ready to go home, Mom? She asked. I looked around the hangar one last time. I looked at the flag. I looked at the eagles on my shoulder that I would take off tonight for the last time. Then I looked at James, the man who had almost broken me, but who had ended up helping to build me back stronger. Yeah, I said, resting my hand on his shoulder. Let's go home. Mission accomplished. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I know many of you are fighting your own battles right now. Maybe in a cafe booth or in a car with someone who refuses to see your worth. Remember, their inability to see your value does not decrease it. You define your own rank. If this story gave you strength today, Please support this channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. And if you're ready to stand tall in your own life, type mission accomplished in the comments below. Dismissed.